So should we start, Sui? Okay, I see. 1 minute. Is it possible to stop sharing for a minute?
Uh,
And then we share when we are.
okay, I'm stopping share.
Uh-huh. Good. And then we can start. I will give the permission to record. Uh, let's see. So, welcome to the Helsus Global South Encounters with me, Franklin Obiodum, Associate Professor of Sustainability Science with Global Development Studies as the chair. The entire webinar should take about 1 hour, divided as follows. The speaker will have 20 to 30 minutes to present his lecture, followed by 10 to 20 minutes of questions and comments by all of us and responses by the speaker. Before then, our practice is to turn off our videos and mute our microphones, but questions about the talk can be sent to me in the personalized chat box. Our speaker today is a mathematician, statistician, and econometrician. Professor Asad Zaman is also the world's foremost authority in Islamic economics. But his journey to this alternative started with a mastery of conventional science. At the age of only 16 years, he arrived in Boston to start a bachelor's degree in mathematics at MIT. There, he was schooled in Western models of thought. He positively and proactively espoused pure logic. But by the time he had finished a master's in statistics and a PhD in economics at Stanford at the age of about 23, he had already started his rebellion against not only pure ahistorical, secular, and asocial reasoning, but also secular Western social science. With experience and education, he discovered that it is not in the North, and certainly not in the Western universities, that the elements of true and transformational development reside, but rather the conditions for these foundations are in the South and in its non-Western alternatives. These sharply contrasting experiences are manifest and indeed are magnified in the magnificent career of Professor Asad Zaman, formerly the Vice Chancellor of the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, an institute committed to nurturing Southern-oriented development economics. He taught economics and econometrics at Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, Johns Hopkins, and the California Institute of Technology, all centers of what is usually called respected economics. But Professor Zaman is no respecter, but rather a critic of the so-called fundamentals of mainstream economics, which provide not only the compass, but also confirmation of materialistic ways of life as the best and only way for modern civilization. Yet, unlike other critics, his alternative, more comprehensive real-world economics also includes religion and spirituality. In his stimulating paper, Islam's Gift and Economy of Spiritual Development, published recently in the American Journal of Economics and Sociology, he begins with a spiritual aphorism, and I quote, "For what profits a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul?" End of quote. His textbook, Statistical Foundations of Econometric Techniques, widely used in the field, is a forensic, technically sound, philosophical critique and reconstruction of economics and the tools it holds so dear. According to one reviewer, the book is an art. It is unique. It is a masterpiece. It is full of quote unquote enlightening parable. One of these parables could not escape the attention of the reviewer. With acknowledgement, I quote it loosely and borrow from it liberally. Quote, "Lost in the desert, the companions were anxiously searching for water. In desperation, they decided to dig. Most dug a hole here and another one there, abandoning their holes quickly to look for a better place in their anxiety. Some, however, put their trust in God and calmly kept digging deeper and deeper at the same spot. They found the water and also gave others to drink. End of quote. This review did not appear in a journal of philosophy, religion, or culture. It was published in econometric reviews with ringing endorsement. Such is the work of Professor Zaman. Unconventional, nonconformist, and critical, yes, but impossible to dismiss by the leading scholars and practitioners in the field. Ironically, it is also difficult to place by Western left radicals, even though they say they are pluralist. But perhaps it is because the critiques of these Western scholars is typically secular. But why so when the world is indeed also religious? In a recent detailed review of religion and development published in Progress in Development Studies, Barbara Bompani describes development studies which is based on secular assumptions as, quote, mainstream. The papal encyclical letter on care for our common home also clearly shows that sustainability science cannot ignore religion. Is Professor Zaman then the more sensitive to the real world, the more comprehensive, the more radical, not the radicals in the Western left consensus? Professor Zaman is currently serving as external advisor on the Monetary Policy Committee of the State Bank of Pakistan. His topic for today is alternative models of development becoming the change we want to see in the world. We have in global development studies and indeed in HELSIS discussed a wide range of alternative models, all of which we have found wanting. Is Professor Zaman's range of alternatives more compelling? Has Professor Zaman gone too far? Or is he, as he always has been, at the forefront of challenging Western conventions or alternatives, even in their most critical and most radical forms? Professor Zaman argues that the sustainability crisis arises from the corruption of our souls, and hence a resolution requires the renewal of our souls. But does sustainability science have a soul at all? And if it does, who or what is the demon that has corrupted it? Ladies and gentlemen, to present a philosophically inspired, well researched, and well grounded Global South responses, please join me in welcoming Professor Asad Zaman, connecting from Islamabad, Pakistan. Welcome, Professor Zaman, to Helsinki. The microphone is yours.
Thank you for this very wholesome praise, more than I deserve. I will. We have short amount of time. The topic that I want to deal with is quite complex, long, and difficult, and so I will try to. I will just avoid preliminaries and go straight to the talk. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Here it is. Okay, can you see my screen now? Hopefully.
Yes.
Somebody? Yes, okay. All right, so I'm going to launch into the talk because without preliminaries, because there's a lot to cover and I had to condense it, and it's unfamiliar material, so it will take some time to digest. All right, so let me start with a quote from the Quran that corruption has appeared on the land and the sea because of what the hands of people have earned. So basically, this expresses something which we can easily understand, that all of this crisis of environment has been created by people. The world was a clean place before we corrupted it. So, since we are the source of this problem, the solution will also have to be found inside ourselves. And so, to purify the planet, we must first purify our hearts. How do we do that? So, this is a lesson which has been forgotten. I went to university and nobody ever told me that self-knowledge is the beginning of all wisdom. And this is something which is known in all traditions across the world, but a lesson which has been forgotten in Western universities. So, how can we acquire self-knowledge? Well, this is a more difficult thing than appears on the surface. There are two important tactics that I would recommend based on my personal experience. One is to note that we are shaped by the streams of history. And so while we are within these history streams, we cannot understand our own thought processes. So we have to stand as an external observer outside the streams of history. And we have to look at ourselves from an alien perspective, such as the one that I'm going to provide you. So self-knowledge, you see, one thinks of it as we sit in the lotus position and contemplate our navel. This is completely false. Nothing will be gained from such an exercise. Self-knowledge is a very difficult thing to do. So let me show you my own. This is my passport photo from 1980. That's about 40 years ago. And it shows that I have long hair. And why? Now, you see, when I was living I was at MIT, I didn't realize, I have no idea that this long hair was the consequence of the Vietnam War, which led to deaths of students, and they were protesting against the establishment, and the way they chose to protest was to defy social norms by growing long hair. For me, if somebody had asked why, I'd said, well, everybody is doing it, and it saves me trips to the barber shop. Now, if you look at this picture, you see that I don't have a beard. Why? When in my heritage, everybody, beard is sign of maturity and respect. Well, that's because of the global conquest and colonization which took place, which led to the hegemony of the West and the immense admiration for the West that arose in the minds of the colonized people. But still, there is a trace of my heritage. The kurta I am wearing, the shirt, doesn't have a collar. This is from our tradition, a dress from our tradition. So you see, all of these things are reflected. But one thing I would like to say is that I had no awareness of any of these things. I was just a 16-year-old with at that point, not in 1980. But so the point is that history shapes us in ways we do not know. So what I'm going to do is switch to how the tides of European history have shaped us, but also I'm going to look at this from the perspective of an outsider, not from within. So one of the important landmarks of European history is the trauma of loss of faith which occurred. Why did the loss of faith in Christianity occur? Well, the story told by the Europeans to themselves is that we rejected superstition. There was a progress of reason. And this is often, you can find contemporary history books which say that Europeans are uniquely rational, scientific, brave, creative, honest, etc., etc. However, so this kind of thing actually is very harmful in terms of acquiring self-knowledge. So a better way to look at it is, if you look at Barbara Tuchman, she has written that the most momentous event in European history was the corruption of a sequence of Renaissance popes, which led to the Reformation and shattered the unity of Christianity. And then there was ruthless fratricidal warfare among different Christian sects, and this led to a general disenchantment with religion. So it was not the progress of reason, but actually the failure of Christianity in certain respects, and actually the search of power disguised under Christianity, that led to this loss of faith. This loss of faith was a traumatic event. In the 19th century, social scientists, you find that nearly everyone stresses, every one of the major figures suffers from nervous breakdown. And the famous Nietzsche quote about the madman and the death of God, which I will, and there's also Bertrand Russell, who's talking about the loss of faith and basically the fact that the world is completely purposeless, void of meaning. And this meaningless of the universe is a tragedy for anyone who contemplates it. But there's nothing to do, he says, except to live with this tragedy. So, in the 19th century, philosophers were saying that, is life really worth living? The only serious philosophical question is suicide, myth of Sisyphus, where we are engaged in this enormous struggle and it's all completely meaningless. So one of the consequences of this loss of faith was the emergence of science as the alternative religion. The belief, which is even now very strongly and firmly embodied in university curricula, is that science is the only path to certain knowledge, and that science will eventually solve all problems of human kind. So I went to Disney World, and there was this future world which showed all sorts of advanced technological gadgets. The problem is that, can a washing machine solve the problem of heartbreak and divorce and all other personal tragedies that we suffer? The answer is obviously no. So the issue is that problems of our human lives cannot be solved by science and technology. So a disastrously wrong theory of knowledge emerged in the West. This was basically because, having been deceived and betrayed by religion, the Europeans, intellectuals, promised that from now on we're not going to trust our hearts, we're going to trust only what we can touch and see. And that is the basic philosophy of empiricism, which was started with David Hume. He said that we can only trust facts and logic. And so take all your libraries and take any book which doesn't use facts and logic and just burn it, because it's just an illusion. So this means basically putting all of the literature, philosophy, arts, everything into the fire, because it doesn't do calculations and doesn't do science. So what is the counter thesis to that? Let us realize that my only source of knowledge is my life experience. And this life experience is heavily subjective. It is unique to me. Nobody else has my life experience. Nobody else was born in 1955, and nobody else has experienced what I have experienced. So it's completely unique. If I think about patterns of history and I ask, what do I learn from that? That would be kind of silly and counterproductive. Suppose I'm deciding who should I marry, and I say, okay, let me look at the empirical experience of the people who have married, instead of thinking about who I am and who my prospective mate is. This would be a crazy thing to do, because I am unique, she is unique, the circumstances we face are unique. So general experience can only provide some general guidance, but it would be foolish to derive scientific laws about this matter, because things are new every moment. So how can we learn from life experiences when they are when they are unique and when they lie outside the bounds of scientific laws. As I said, we can do it by sharing. Human beings are connected at our hearts, and if we can adopt an external perspective, look at ourselves as others see us, we can gain a lot of insight. Now, one important thing is that a perspective is not a fact. It is not subject to the true-false binary. This is a serious problem because in university education, I was trained to believe that to respect facts and to hold personal opinions in contempt. My opinion, that doesn't matter. That's nothing. The only thing which matters are solid, hard facts. But actually, the reverse is true. Every human being is precious, and their perspective on life has value, regardless of whether it's true or false, and it cannot really be evaluated in terms of true and false. Knowledge is experienced, it is not proven. If we reflect on our lives, how many theorems do we live by? Our experiences are not of the kind of thing that we study about in universities, but that is the only source of knowledge we have. Now, here is a theory of personality from Imam al-Ghazali in the Islamic tradition. He talks about 4 dimensions: the ruh, the soul, which is the soul or the heart, and our nafs, which is the desires, and our aql. Now, what happened because of the rejection of religion was that European intellectuals rejected the soul, the heart, and the nafs as sources of knowledge and said we will only rely on our brains. And this really is due to the trauma of loss of faith, because if we actually became computing machines, we would not be able to feel, sense, experience life, and we would become robots instead of humans. So the consequences of rejecting the soul and the nafs and the heart as sources of knowledge is that our social science theories are very, very poor. We don't know what human beings are like, what families should be like, what communities and societies should be like, because we only think of this as a collection. This is what led Thatcher to say there is no society, there's only individuals. An additional fact, which I won't be able to cover in detail, but is very important in shaping our thoughts, is the emergence of a market society. And this has been covered in The Great Transformation by Karl Polanyi. But basically, in a market society, everything is for sale. And the education of a market society teaches us how to be a human resource instead of a human being. So one useful book in this context is Julie Rubin, who has written about the modern university, intellectual transformation, the marginalization of morality. She says that if you look at college catalogs in the early 20th century, you find that they are about shaping character. That's the goal of the university. But today, the universities teach you how to build a bomb, but they don't teach you that it is wrong to kill. And the reason that science is the only source of knowledge, and the science does not provide us with any knowledge about values. So the greatest damage has been done to humankind by the new religion, which is economic theory, which poses as a positive science, but it is only a set of values. As Max Weber said, that the spirit of capitalism is just the drive to earn more and more money. And Michael Moore says that capitalism is the legalization of greed. And the fundamental model at the heart of economics is Homo economicus, who has no emotions because he is only maximizing his utility or profits. He has no heart. He doesn't feel any sympathy for his fellow human being. He is cruel because he has no soul. He can do anything that is required to make a buck. And that's what we see on the planet in terms of the acts of the corporations today. Like they market milk for babies knowing that this milk powder will kill thousands of infants, and they're ready to kill infants for profits, because the only thing they have is a brain. They have no hearts and no souls and no emotions. Book by Julie Nelson, or an article, Poisoning the Well, How Economic Theory Damages the Moral Imagination. She says that people are born generous, but economic theory teaches us that rational behavior is selfish. She says that businesses leaders would like to be socially responsible, but the theory tells us that we should pursue profits, and that's the highest morality. In this world, which is highly interdependent, economic theory teaches us that efficiency achieved by survival of the fittest. And in this chaotic world, things are unpredictable, but we treat them as predictable. And so the search for humane solutions to our problems is made impossible by the blind social science that we have, which gives us theories which are heartless and soulless. So there is some recognition of this. Ariel Rubinstein, who's a famous economist, he says that I'm a micro teacher, but I'm actually a part of a big machine which does brainwashing of students in ways that I don't like. It teaches students to be cold and selfish and profit-seeking. And this teaching, even though it has nothing to do with truth, has an enormous amount of influence in shaping the world we see, because it creates the culture around us. And similarly, a Harvard MBA prof, Shoshana Zuboff, says that what we have taught has caused real suffering. So how can we reclaim our identities and reshape our lives? What we have been taught to believe is highly damaging to us and to the world. So we need to learn what it means to be a human being and how to be a human being, because this knowledge has been removed from our educational system. And our movies and our social media, none of them carry this message of what it means to be a human being and how we can learn to be human beings. The Humean idea that we should burn all the books not containing facts and logic has sort of come true. All of the books of ancient wisdom gather dust on our shelves. Actually, what is worse is that we are the outcomes of a grand experiment which was carried out in humanity more or less explicitly. Keynes, famous economist, said that love of economy is a mental disease, but we must plant this disease in the people so that they chase after wealth. And when we become very rich, then we can afford to abandon this. So this was a very false and unfortunate experiment, but we are the guinea pigs on whom this experiment was carried out, and our mind was infected with this disease. So this is in conflict with the ancient wisdom that we should not be pursuing wealth. But everything that we are taught teaches us the opposite. And so we have been trained to set pleasure, profits, power, career, and wealth as our life goals. We have been taught to prize reason above emotions and facts over feelings. And we have been taught that this world is a jungle of competition and survival of the fittest. So how can we learn to be human beings instead of human resources? Well, I'm going to offer 3 lessons from the Islamic tradition. One is that human lives are infinitely precious. We cannot buy or sell human beings. So we cannot be human resources. And the heart is our guide to the most important truths, and that all of the humanity, all of the creation of God, which includes animals, flora, fauna, the earth, the planet, everything. We are all connected on the spiritual level. So, just a little bit of elaboration and then I will stop. Human lives are infinitely precious. If you save a life, it is as if you have saved mankind. Every seed carries with it a forest. It can grow into a tree. So basically, our goal in life is to realize the potential for excellence which is within our hearts and within the hearts of every person. So this has a lot of implications. If we take seriously the idea that every human life is of infinitely precious, but this is in potential. So that's one of the meanings, is that the seed cannot understand who it is by contemplating itself. It has to go through the process of becoming a tree in order to realize who it is, because the who the seed is not within the seed. So similarly, by the struggle to become who we can, we will realize who we are, not by contemplation and not by meditation. So basically, it's about the journey, not about the destination. It's not what we have in our hand, but what we can do to create change. But these two things have to be taken together. There has to be a very high goal, and that goal has to guide the next step in our journey. So if we were to take this seriously, that the goal is to create an education which allows us to recognize the infinite potential within us and to try to realize this. Some of the simple consequences is that there would be no labor market, because human lives cannot be bought or sold. Wars would be finished. The value of wealth would be recognized as being only useful to the extent that it allows us to enrich our lives. And the purpose of society is to enable all participants to lead rich and fulfilling lives. What a contrast from Madeleine Albright, who said that killing of 500,000 Iraqi children was worth it for the realization of political goals. So how can we create a society in which every child is enabled to achieve their full potential? So the second lesson is that we have to learn to trust the heart as a source of knowledge, because it's only with the heart that we can see what is essential. So we have to reverse Hume, redefine knowledge. Knowledge comes from the heart, not from facts and logic. Real knowledge is knowledge of how to live our unique and precious lives. And this cannot be found in books of mathematics. Science is only useful to the extent that enables us to live better lives. But it is not helpful at all in the quest of leading a meaningful life. So the heart is the central cognitive faculty. It's mentioned often in the Quran. That the Quran mentions the eyes, the ears, and the hearts. So these are all instruments of cognition. Our heart feels compassion, love, and senses justice and revolts against oppression. So, but in order to achieve these, we have to cleanse our hearts. Tazkiyah, this is one of the key concepts of our religion, and the mystics of our religion insist that we must cleanse our hearts. And how to do this? Basically, we have to reverse the central lesson of economics. Economics says that rational behavior is about pursuit of pleasure. And spirituality says that it's about self-sacrifice and the pursuit of service to mankind. So if we make a goal that I seek nothing for myself, I will seek to serve the creation of God for the sake of love of God. That is what leads to the to spiritual development, which gets us to the soul, which is the spiritual connection to the universe. And there's this verse of Rumi that we are not a drop of ocean. The materialistic worldview says that I'm very tiny, I can't do anything. But the spirituality says that the entire ocean is contained within my soul. And we learn to recognize and respect the creation of God as the living planet. And all of the creation is the family of God, according to narration in our religion. And those who serve the family for the sake of his love are beloved to him. So it's this love which unites us all on the spiritual level. So it is our visions which shape our future, not the material circumstances which lie behind us. And the choices we make depend on our vision and the dreams that we have. So spirituality is the capacity of our heart to feel for others and to rise above the material circumstances. Islam describes a three-stage process of spiritual growth, from nafs ammara, which is almost precisely the definition of Homo economicus in economic theory, to the second stage where you start to realize your relationships and connections with others, and you realize that it's not all about me. And then eventually you come to the stage where you realize our complete union with all others, so that hurting another person is just as painful to me as hurting myself. So I will conclude by saying that the task which faces us is enormous, and there is this Sufi parable, mystic parable of the bird which carries a drop of water in its beak to put out the enormous fire, and so it feels like a hopeless task. What can I, a little person, do to change the enormous forces which are arraigned against us today for those who struggle to save the planet from the climate catastrophe? Well, the point is that if we do our best, then this struggle will shape us and will give us what we are trying to become, and the outcome is not in our hands. If enough of us join, then actually miracles can happen. But this is not, we're not looking for success. Maybe we will be burnt in the fire, but that will be the best that we can do. And having fought the battle well is good enough, is satisfying enough, is more than enough actually. So I'll end here. This is the last slide.
Thank you, Prof. Zaman, for an excellent lecture. The floor is now open for questions.